Get those out. Put all our phones away. All our phones away for right now. We're going to get started in just a minute. So, little review. Quiet it down, please. Thank you. A little bit of a review. Okay? We have talked about kind of the absolute basics of the court system in the U.S. All right? We've got a dual court system. All right? We've got the federal courts, state courts. Okay? We've covered that idea. Okay? That there's the Supreme Court way at the top, and all other courts are subordinate. All right, kind of a fancy word for they're below it. All right, anything the Supreme Court says, they got to follow in line. Okay, that's a kind of a big concept. I want to make sure we understand. We covered the various types of jurisdiction. Okay, federal courts deal with federal matters. Okay? If it's something to do with the Constitution, constitutional law, okay, a federal court is going to be involved. I guarantee it. Okay? If there is some kind of lawsuit between two people from two different states, okay, federal court. Okay? Two states are suing each other, or a state in the United States is one of the parties. All right? Federal court. Okay? State courts, you're suing someone within your own state for under a certain amount of money, state court. Okay? Something happens within a state dealing with state law, state court. Okay? We're going to focus more on the federal ones today. All right? Those types of jurisdiction. All right, these are very important. All right, you've got exclusive jurisdiction. Who wants to tell me what exclusive jurisdiction means? I know it's early. Yep. Only tried in federal courts or only tried in state courts. It's one or the other. Cannot be both. It's exclusive. Okay?
I thought that was only suspect.
What?
It only suspect.
That's, we're focusing on the federal courts for now. Leave it how it is. All right? Concurrent jurisdiction. Yep. That's right. Okay? You kind of get a choice with that. All right? You can choose either a federal court to have your case heard or a state court. Usually your attorney is going to have a good idea of how to operate in that scenario. Okay? Then you've got some kind of different kinds of jurisdiction. Okay? You've got original jurisdiction. All right? That one's really easy. All it means, your case is being heard for the first time. Okay? Other one, appellate. Your case is not being heard for the first time. It's been heard before, but you appealed the case. Okay? You appealed it to an appeals court usually, and they're going to review your case again. All right? That's appellate jurisdiction. Okay? Today we're going to be moving on to kind of the ins and outs of being a federal judge. All right? So, federal judges. Being a federal judge is a huge deal. All right? Important to know, it's a lifelong position. You are appointed by the president. Okay, remember. All right, we're going to cover this immediately after today on that sheet I just handed out. The president has the power to select and appoint federal judges. One of the big jobs he has to do right when he gets in office. Okay? The Senate approves. Okay? President appoints the federal judges, the Senate approves. Okay? And again, they don't have term limits. They don't have terms in general. It's a lifelong job. Okay? You either die, you retire, or you're impeached. Okay? Any questions so far? All right. These two ideas, all right, these are kind of two big schools of thought when it comes to being a federal judge, sometimes even a judge in general, okay, but it's primarily related to the Constitution, okay, so federal judge work. Okay, you got judicial activism and judicial restraint, okay? Judicial activism, that's kind of expanding the idea of what the Constitution allows you to do, okay? It's a liberal interpretation of the Constitution, all right? You want to be able to kind of stretch the words within it, all right? Interpret it in a way that it gives the courts a bit more power, okay? Kind of allows you as a judge to do a lot more. Yeah?
You said to interpret it differently, interpret laws and
The Constitution. Mm-hmm. So within the Constitution, there's a lot of kind of, not vague language, but language that's kind of meant to be adapted over time, all right? With judicial activism, that's what you're doing, all right? You're taking those words, you're kind of stretching them to fit modern situations, okay? The Constitution was written way, way back when our country was founded, okay? Things kind of need to be adapted from time to time, all right? Times change. America's definitely different from the late 1700s. We have to work with what we've got, okay? On the other end, you've got judicial restraint, okay? Kind of the conservative approach to being a federal judge, all right? Main thing to know about this, they want to stick to the framers' intent, all right? Whenever you hear that word framers, whether it's in a U.S. history class or a government class, anything like that, it's kind of the people involved in the writing of the Constitution, okay? Kind of the people involved with forming our most modern iteration of the government, all right? The framers, like a James Madison, Thomas Jefferson type of guy, all right? Someone you'd see on a nickel, George Washington, stuff like that. So, if you're practicing judicial restraint, you want to stick to what the Constitution says. You do not want to expand upon it. You do not want to make it too open to interpretation. All right? You want to stick to the letter of the law, strictly. All right? It's a conservative approach. All right? You do not want to twist the words. You do not want to manipulate anything at all within the Constitution. All right? Both sides are important to understand. It's very effective if you have kind of a balance of the two. Okay? If the time calls for it, you need to be able to practice a little bit of judicial activism. All right? You need to be able to interpret what's written in the Constitution in a modern scenario. Okay? But it's also very important that you're not twisting those words to anyone's benefit. Okay? You need to stick to the letter of the law at all times, but you need to know when it's right to apply it to a modern situation through judicial activism. Okay? So make sure we got those two concepts down, kind of opposite ends of a spectrum when it comes to being a federal judge. All right? So, precedent. Okay? This is kind of a legalese term. Okay? Setting a precedent, stuff like that. It means serving as a guide for settling similar cases later on. Okay? So, say the court has a case. All right? Supreme Court, perhaps. All right? They all get together. They're kind of deciding on how they're going to deal with this. and they make their decision. Okay, release the decision, it's made, it's done. Okay? In the future, if a case of similar nature comes up, they will look back to that case. Look at the decision they made then. They'll compare the facts. Okay? And they will usually decide according to precedent. All right? They've made a similar decision in the past. They're going to probably make it again in the future. All right? Courts don't love to break precedent very often. Okay? It takes some pretty unique circumstances. All right? Some changing kind of society circumstances to set a new precedent. All right? Okay, like I was saying very early on. Again, any questions? And we're moving a little quick. Got the advisory today, so we got to kind of move along. All right? All right. One of the ways you can become no longer a federal judge is impeachment, just like the president. It's a little bit of a different process. All right? It's one of the checks and balances things. All right? The president will appoint you. You're in a federal position. All right? You better behave. All right? There's kind of an understood and a unspoken code of conduct you need to follow as a federal judge. All right? If you're acting erratically, you're making wild decisions, you're going to be under a magnifying glass. People are going to be watching you. Okay? If outside of the courtroom, you're acting like a fool, okay? They're going to come down on you. All right? They're going to look at your conduct. Yeah?
If you break a law as a judge, do you think you get more leniency, or do they have anything like the president?
You're not really supposed to. All right? As a federal judge, you do probably have kind of an in the criminal justice system, but you're supposed to be treated like a citizen. All right? Is it going to be that way every time? Probably not. All right? But that's the way it should be. Okay? Federal judges should be treated equal under the eyes of the law. All right? The president, there are kind of laws protecting the president from stuff like that. All right? So it's a little different for them. All right? But good question. All right? So in 180 years, I don't think we've ever had a fully impeached president. Motions have been put forth. We've had partially impeached, where it gets through one part of Congress, doesn't make it through the other. All right? We've had several impeached federal judges. All right? Again, when you become president, you're in charge of appointing a ton of people, a ton of different positions, all right? You've got all those big-time cabinet positions, okay? You've got some of them smaller, kind of department head, agency head positions, okay? Then you've got all of the federal judges, okay? Usually you've got a team of staffers kind of sifting through a group of possible candidates. They're going to put those together for you. But at the end of the day, it's your signature. You need to appoint these people. If one of them does bad, one of them's kind of acting up, being a bad federal judge somehow, it ends up kind of looking bad on you as president. Okay? You appointed them. You signed off on them being given that very powerful position. You better think about it before you do it. Okay? And again, throughout our history, we have had many impeached federal judges. Okay? It's not uncommon. All right, any questions there? Yep.
Who decides to impeach you?
Generally, it'll be a little bit of a consensus thing, all right? Congress votes on it. They decide, all right? But usually it'll be them making it in the news somehow, all right? They're being audited, not like a money thing, but their kind of just behavior and track record will get looked at, and it'll be given to a committee in Congress. They'll put the vote forth, then they decide on impeachment. All right? Again, much different process than the president. Okay? Any other questions before we keep going? Okay. Talk a little bit about inferior courts. All right? There we go. All right, so below the Supreme Court are all of the inferior courts. All right, they're federal, but they're not the Supreme Court. Okay, this is a very basic kind of layout of them. All right, for every state has a Supreme Court. All right, you've got the federal Supreme Court over in D.C. That's the big deal one with the chief justices and the justices, stuff like that. Every state has a Supreme Court of their own. All right, so when it comes to state law within that state, they are the top authority. Okay, in Michigan, the building is like maybe half a mile behind the front of the Capitol building in Lansing. All right, it's a big, kind of scary looking, like almost like church-like building back there. All right, it's a state Supreme Court. Okay, big place. You've also got district courts. All right, district courts, when you're driving through the city and you see a federal court, usually it's a district court, okay? They handle both criminal and civil cases. All right, so if you break a federal law, you're being held criminally responsible, you go to a federal court, okay? That's something like a major drug charge. All right, kind of a RICO case. So if you're in the mob, doing kind of racketeering, stuff like that, federal case. All right.
Tax evasion.
Tax evasion, yep. Stuff like that, okay? The federal courts are going to come down on you. It's a federal crime, okay? Civil cases, that's something like suing, all right? Major lawsuits will go to a federal court, all right? Whether it's over a lot of money, okay? Something like a large class action lawsuit, something involving a large company and a lot of people involved and hurt. All those cases surrounding mesothelioma and asbestos, okay? Big deal lawsuits, all right? Get bumped up to the district courts, okay? Federal courts. Most of these federal cases that make it in there, though, get tossed, okay? They'll propose it, they'll have a big motion hearing, and the federal courts will kind of sift through and decide which ones they're going to hear, which ones they're going to set aside. All right? Up from there, you've got the courts of appeals. So say you're in the district, yeah.
If they put it to the side or dispose of it or whatever, can you still try it in a state court?
Kind of. If it pertains to a federal law, you're going to have to keep coming back to that district court. All right? Usually when you set forth a motion like that and they deny it, you just kind of go back to the drawing board. All right? You can get that case back. If they still want to pursue charges, that attorney's going to make a lot more money because they're going to keep working. It's more hours. But also, they can kind of change their approach. Okay? A lot of times the district court judge will see it, say, I don't really like where they're coming from with this case. I don't think the evidence is good enough, stuff like that. All right? You build up your case a little better, probably have to wait a while, motion again, and maybe they'll pick you up. All right? You can try again. All right? It's just a very long, difficult process. All right? Anything else? Okay. Courts of appeals. All right? So, courts below this court of appeals, like a district court, something like that. All right? Say you're in there, they decide, and it's not something you like. All right? You are guilty of a crime that you feel, probably very strongly, that you are innocent of. All right? Or that the sentence passed down to you was way too harsh and unfair. Okay? You have the option to appeal that case. Excuse me. Okay? Very difficult process on your end. All right? It's a lot of time. All right? You got to work with your attorneys. You got to work with the courts. Okay? You got to keep working to appeal that case. And a lot of times when it gets up there, they're going to look at it. They're going to deny it. Okay? You better make a completely airtight case in an appeal. Okay? A lot of times, you can't really add anything. All right? They're just going to take the case from that lower court, if the appeal is granted, they're going to look over it and either agree or disagree. They're going to affirm the decision or reverse it. If they affirm it, that just means it's the same thing, all right? Same result, lower court was correct, that we're leaving it how it is. If they reverse it, that can either mean they're letting you off the hook, a lower court messed up in procedure or treated you unfairly in some way, or they're changing what the lower court decided. Okay? They will decide whether to reduce your sentence. All right? Give you something different, usually that you're trying to do instead of, say, prison time. Maybe you're trying to chop your prison time in half, or make yourself eligible for parole, something like that. Okay? Usually has to do with prison time. Okay? They don't want you having to do a lot of time. You want to try to make a deal. If they didn't give you that deal, you try to appeal. All right? And if the appeal says no, you're out of luck. Okay? Try again later on. Again, that's something that people in jail are often trying to do. If you're in jail for a long period of time and you want to get out, appealing your case is something you're going to keep trying to do. Yeah?
So, if your case is already decided in a different court,
Mm-hmm.
and you're already in prison, you can still continue to appeal?
Yes. Again, very difficult process. Again, think about it. People in jail, odds are you don't have a ton of money. All right? So the lawyers you're working with are usually working pro bono. They're working on their own accord. All right? Usually out of the goodness of their hearts or to gain experience in the legal system. So it's going to take a long time for them to kind of get what they need to get you a good chance of a successful appeal. All right? There are entire super difficult classes you can take. Any of you plan to be an attorney, go to law school, anything like that, that will detail what it takes to put together a possibly successful appeal. All right? What I want us to understand right now, if your case in the district courts does not really pan out how you want it to, you have that option to appeal to the Court of Appeals. Okay? That's where it goes up to. Above that, usually, it's a state Supreme Court. Okay? It can appeal its way up the chain. Okay? Again, very rare that happens, but it can happen. All right? Our next one's kind of a unique one. The Court of International Trade. All right, the reason it's mentioned here, it is an inferior court. It is a federally operated court. Okay, international trade is something that the federal government loves to control. Okay? There are books. You could fill a library full of books filled with international trade laws and regulations. Okay? This is our kind of foremost expert agency on it, all right? The Court of International Trade. Their job is they see any kind of discrepancy in federal trading, okay? Any kind of strange, kind of skirting the rules, not paying any kind of taxes, stuff like that with international trade, they're going to step in, all right? Usually, this isn't going to result in jail time. It's going to result in a giant fine that the court imposes on you. You got to make up for lost time. You got to pay some kind of tax, fines, stuff like that. Okay? The Court of International Trade deals with that stuff daily. All right? You got billions of dollars of goods coming in and out of the country every day. All kind of the major cases in there having to do with fees and paying stuff and declaring goes through there. All right? Okay. This is the last part right here. I'd like us to put a little star right next to it. All right? In your court case assignment, I guarantee this case comes up. All right? Marbury v. Madison. It's a landmark Supreme Court case. Extremely important to all of us, okay? Especially in this government class. All right? It's the origin of judicial review. We're going to cover judicial review again in a minute, but we're going to mention it right now as well. Okay, this is the power of the Supreme Court to declare either a law made by Congress or an action of the president unconstitutional. Now, that's kind of a long word. So what they will do, they will see something passing through Congress or something that already has been passed through Congress. They will see a state law, a law that a state has passed. Any law in the land, okay? We'll take a look at it, we'll pass it around amongst a little group of justices, and if they decide, it will be unconstitutional. All right? It is not in line with the Constitution. They have the power to decide that. If it is in line with the Constitution, you got nothing to worry about. All right? It's a fair law. If it's not, the Supreme Court is going to cancel it out. They declare it unconstitutional, it's gone. Okay? This has happened in some pretty important cases. Okay? You've got the Brown v. Board. That's a big example. All right? That's when the big case surrounding the desegregation of public schools. All right? This got thrown around with that. All right? The flag burning law. I think it's Texas v. Johnson. Okay? There's a rule in Texas. Okay, can't burn the American flag. The Supreme Court got to take a look at it. Unconstitutional. Violates your First Amendment rights. All right, I definitely look into that one a little bit more detailedly. Okay? So, make sure we know. We need to tie those two together. The origin of judicial review is Marbury v. Madison. Okay? And this is a power that only the Supreme Court has. Do we have any questions so far? All right, I'll give us a minute while we're writing. I'd like us to turn our attention to that checks and balances sheet. Looks like this. All right. Throughout this semester, we've gone over pretty much everything on here, all right? So it'll be some review, all right? But I want to make sure we have an idea of exactly what checks and balances is, okay? We have an idea of where it comes into play in each branch of the government, okay? So just follow along with me as we go through this. This is for you to keep. It will help you out tremendously, guarantee it. Okay? So, checks and balances, put in very, very simple terms. Okay? It's kind of how the government prevents one branch from becoming more powerful than another one. Okay? We've kind of thrown the term around a little bit in this class, all right? One branch of government will have a check over the other. All right, we're going to get into some specific examples in a second, but that generally means they're able to restrict the power of another branch of government. All right, each branch of government is tremendously powerful. Okay, what those framers were trying to do with checks and balances is, again, back to their kind of initial thought when making a U.S. government. All right, they want to prevent tyranny. All right? They were so afraid back then of some new king-like figure telling them what to do, making them pay a bunch of taxes and stuff like that, that they didn't want something like that to be a major concern for them in the future. All right? You put in rules in the government where you allow them to kind of regulate each other, keep them from being in complete control, makes for a pretty stable government structure. Okay? Checks and balances helps out with that big time. All right? Before we get into the specific examples, quick review of those branches of government, because they're going to come up pretty rapid fire, okay, when we go over the examples. All right? Legislative. the House, the Senate. All right? Their job, make laws for the country. All right? Popularly elected by the people, they make the laws. Okay? The executive branch, it's made up of the president and the federal bureaucracy. Okay? So you got the president, the cabinet, vice president, stuff like that. Okay? All those kind of departments you hear about. Those make up the executive branch. It's huge, huge branch of the government. Incredibly powerful. Okay? But very much checked by the other two branches. All right? And what we're going over right now, the judicial branch. Okay? This is made up of the Supreme Court and the other federal courts. Their job is interpreting and applying those laws. Okay? So they see the Constitution, they see the federal laws that come through. Their job is to interpret them, to kind of understand how they're used, understand how they can be used, and to apply them to society. Okay? The executive's job, this one gets kind of confusing, so I saved it for last. Okay? Executing the law. Okay? They have a constitutional responsibility to carry out the law. See that it is being carried out. Okay? Executing it. All right? They keep an eye on those other two branches, just as the other two branches keep an eye on them. Okay? That's another thing that's come up, the watchdog function, each of these. Okay? They keep an eye on each other. They make sure that they're acting in line. Okay? They start getting too powerful. They start trying to wave their power around too much. That's when you see these checks starting to come out. Okay? So let's flip this over. We'll look at the examples. Okay? These should all be at least a little bit familiar to each of you. Okay? First off, veto power. It's one of the major powers of the president. Pretty exclusive to them. Okay? President can reject bills presented to them by Congress, the legislative branch, by refusing to sign them. Okay? This results usually in the bill's death. Okay? Before it can even become a law. All right? They refuse to sign it. It's not a law. Okay? We went over all the ins and outs of that veto, but generally, if the president vetoes a bill, it gets sent back to Congress, very small chance of it going anywhere from there. All right? Judicial review. All right? The Supreme Court, the judicial branch, can deem laws made by Congress unconstitutional. All right? Just went over that. Okay? Keep that one in mind. That's a big check that the judicial branch can have over both Congress and the president, because the president can make those executive orders. Okay? These last three, we'll go through really quick because I know we're a little short on time today. All right? Appointment power. Okay? The president, the executive branch, has the power to appoint those federal positions. Judges. Okay? Cabinet heads. Stuff like that. Okay? A little caveat to this, a little extra check. The Senate has to approve them. Okay? All three branches involved in appointment powers. All right? Impeachment. The legislative branch, Congress, can remove president, federal judges, other federal officials through a vote. Okay? They're able to kind of get someone out of power should they be acting not in accordance with the Constitution, or furthermore in any way kind of it's disapproved by the government as a whole. Okay, and last but not least, veto override. All right, so say put a law through Congress, everyone worked really hard on it, the president vetoes it. Okay, Congress doesn't like that. They wanted this law to go through. When it gets sent back to Congress, they can vote with a large majority, 2/3 majority, and override that veto. All right? Cancel out the veto, make the bill a law. All right? Keep this sheet on you. All right? It'll help you out a lot. Nice little fact sheet for the final exam coming up. Yeah. What's up? Yes, this one is the inferior courts and the Supreme Court. We'll come back to inferior court. We'll just takes us about a minute. Any questions before we're all set? All right.